Okay, except this masks the real problem. So if you go back and watch the video, it's the horrible Meta Valentine's Day ad. It's really, really, really bad. It is really, really bad. And I've seen a few people say, well, okay, it's $100 billion. $100 billion, yes, $100 billion is what it cost. But they're like, oh, that's all in the hardware stuff. Meta doesn't want to sell VR headsets. They don't want to be in that business. They think they have to be. Right, so remember, go back some years. And so what was Meta looking at? And they're like, hey, we're on phones, but we don't own the phone. Like, we want to create a world that we own, that is ours, right? And so with that, we are going to accelerate the creation of VR, and we're going to own VR. That's where you're going to go connect on the Meta universe, and you're going to go to the horizons on Meta. Nobody did. But the problem is, Meta quickly realized this isn't the phone market, and they actually don't want to be in the hardware business. Because here's the problem is, remember when like iPhone 3 came out and people were like in line for 7 days to go get a new iPhone? They were all excited about it. There's a high demand. Every time Meta releases a new Quest, there's not a high demand. In fact, there's a softening demand. And they've tried some things. They've tried to be like, hey, let's be the expensive premium brand and we'll do this whole business fancy thing. And everyone's like, yeah, we don't need that. We don't want that. Right now you can go Meta for business. Yeah, how's that going? No one's doing the VR for business, okay? And the demand isn't high enough because you want to sell into business, because then, like when I worked at Valve, if I just paused on a page for an Apple iPad, the tech guys would be like, here, have one, take one. Like force the phones on you, right? They're like, just take these. And they subsidize it. I didn't pay for my own phone for years. So you want to sell into that because then everybody wants to buy them. But the problem is nobody has a reason for VR business. And then the other thing on the phone side was that they had subsidies from the phone carriers themselves, right? And so in the US, a lot of people didn't pay the full price of the phone because their phone carrier paid for it, right? AT&T at first and then everybody. And that's not happening here as well, right? Nobody's subsidizing these. So the consumer's having to pay the full price. And there's soft demand, right? There's no line for these. And so you pair the soft demand for no subsidies in work, no subsidies in carrier. You've got to carry the full market price. You've got to make a discounted product. And so you're not making big margins on that. And so while you can say, hey, the $100 billion was spent on hardware, the reality is the $100 billion was to get you into Meta Horizons, because that's where they want you to live, and you want to do everything in Meta Horizons, right? That guy Matt Ball, who just did some 700-page document on the video game industry. The reason why I make fun of him is he wrote an entire book of how we were all going to live in the metaverse, and that was going to be the whole thing. And he was just so sure it was going to happen. It's already happened. It already happened. Like, he's just an idiot. But like Zuck made a bad bet here. He made a bet that they could spend all this money on hardware, all this money on research, and then people would live in Meta Horizons. And the reality is, go look at that video. You don't want to live there. You don't want to look at it on your phone. It's horrible. And that was the mistake that Meta made. And that's the mistake. It's $100 billion that they're living inside of. Now, someone's going to be like, oh, okay, but the AR glasses, yeah. No one wants that either. Right? There's a soft demand on that. But there's super soft demand in VR. Not to say that there's not a lot of people in VR. But remember, to give you some example, Sony dropped the Move controller originally, right? They came out with the Move controller, it had it going, and then they dropped it. They sold 15 million units, and they said that's too soft of a market for us to sell into. The VR ecosystem's like that, right? It's just too soft, and it's too spread out, and it's too diverse. And one of the things that I helped work on was making sure that there was a standard so that they could all write to them so you could buy any headset and it would just work. But the problem is then nobody wants to go into Meta Horizons. I mean, we say VR chat, but there's also Rec Room. There's like a bunch of VR experiences that are way better, right? Rec Room is amazingly fun, well done by a tiny little company in Seattle. Shout out to them. Hey guys, they haven't gotten a lunch for you guys in a while. We should. But like, they're super awesome. But they were dead focused. So Meta just blew $100 billion on this. And why did they do it? Because instead of hiring game designers that were all sweaty and being like, hey, this is how we do it. It's like, we will hire somebody who's graduated from Princeton and they'll have a PhD in stuffing things up their ass. I don't know. But like, Zuckerberg's all like, oh, it's some pedigree and it's not about just getting shit done. And yeah, they made crap. Nobody wants to be in that. Nobody wants to be full time in VR anyways, right? Nobody. A few people, but you know what I'm saying. So yeah, 100%. A lot of that money went to other places, but that's ignoring the fact that the goal is for that video, for you to want to be in that video. The goal is that $100 billion wasn't to create headsets to sell them. The goal was to get you into VR so that you lived in meta horizons. And so that means then that was $100 billion to get there. And this is their latest expression of that. And that means that $100 billion was, I mean, come on, I could do more with $100.